Hello. While the rest of the crew and I get ready, will you write where you're watching from? Hello. Welcome to our afternoon show, Force Majeure. France, what's up? Seattle, fantastic. Nashville, St. Paul, Hudson, Wisconsin. South Africa, what's up, Bree? How's it going? Lino Lakes, Lakeville, Nashville, Jacqueline. I am in Minneapolis, the UK, fantastic. Birmingham, Brummy, Sunflower Lounge, favorite bar in Birmingham. Fort Collins, how's it going? Philly, 1 hour into the future from my perspective. Minneapolis, Warsaw, nice to see you. Spain, bienvenido, qué bueno. St. Andrews, Scotland, I'm glad you made it. America, keep it mysterious in Seattle. Well, right before I pressed live today, I ate a piece of fruit to which I am slightly allergic. So there's kind of an undercurrent of mystery and danger to this whole show. Queens, what's up? Awesome. Well, Norway, fantastic. Canada, Paris. For those of you who've been kind and patient enough to send a little note about trying to do this show once at an earlier and more decent hour, for those of you who are not in the U.S., I see you UK folks. I thought I'd do an afternoon gig. Did I eat the fruit on purpose? I did. I'm an idiot. No. Cheers. When the coronavirus hit, I was in London. I'd been staying there for quite a while, working on a radio project. And for those of you who are far from home, I feel for you. Although I have to admit, I miss it so damn much. Oh, I miss it. After staying in the UK for a while, I'm trying to get my sea legs, finding it more difficult than I thought it might be. I heard for the first time the quote that's often attributed from George Bernard Shaw that the US and the UK are separated by a common language, which I loved. The idea that that we might misunderstand ourselves as too similar by virtue of the fact that we share a mother tongue. I think there's something to that. I've been thinking a lot about the small differences in the way we live all around the world. Whether or not it's an insufferable affectation or not, I drink a shit ton way more tea now than I did, burn through the shit, in fact, than I did before spending some time in the UK. And I've been thinking a lot about how eager I am to return. You learn a hell of a lot when you are rendered less capable of navigating through the world on autopilot, right? When you really have to pay attention to figure out what the street signs say, or what the casual slang means, or how to read the menu, or to know what side of the street to walk on, or which escalator to take. I think that there's something not only invigorating, but it kind of grinds you into more palpable and charitable dust to be far away from the habits of daily life that you were taught as a kid. I don't seem to be having a meaningful allergic reaction, so we're gonna get this show on the road, man. This time around, I asked if people wanted to pose a few questions, and people did. So I'm gonna tackle those before we get into our reading today. Yeah. Liz Athens asked, essentially, hey, what are you working on? New music, new poetry, new prose. I mentioned when I put the Thursday nights on hiatus that I wanted to spend a little bit of time making new stuff, in part to be totally frank, because I realized that I was out of like short pint-sized pieces that I could read confidently on Thursday nights. And so I've been working on both. I'm working on a couple of new rap songs, refining some of the poems that I've read here online, and trying to tackle some new fiction. So I think I've showed you guys this before, but a lot of my apartment has become essentially devoted towards brainstorming new ideas on any glass or mirrored surface to try to see how they might play together. Bloodshot 3037 on Instagram asks, "What's your favorite word?" That was an opportunity to do some posing and try to come up with a really cool one. But I think my honest answer is I always really love the word obsolescence. Maybe it's just because it's both familiar and fancy by the fact that we all know the word obsolete very well. But that noun form has a certain je ne sais what to it that I really dig. Andy asked, how did the collaboration with the Minnesota Orchestra come to pass? I recorded an album with the Grammy-winning Minnesota Orchestra last year. It's called Sound the Bells. And we'd been working together for a few years before that, staging live shows. They called me as the short answer. I was really lucky that they had like a risk-taking creative director at the helm, who was game to say, hey, let's give this a go. And it seemed like such a fortunate email to receive that at first I wondered if it was fake. But I went in and I made a PowerPoint to try to impress during my first meeting. And I was all business and was delighted when everyone around the table was like, I had set out these goals that I thought that we might share together. Like I imagine that one of the reasons that you might want to work with a musician like me is in an effort to connect with new season ticket holders, potentially, people who you can welcome into this art form. And I remember the dude at the head of the table, Grant, now a friend, just saying essentially, we want to do it because it would be awesome. He shut down me and my PowerPoint in the best possible way. PowerPoint swag, man, for days. I love that program. I really do. I still do. It's so stupid. Weather Daughter asks on Instagram, what do you do when you're feeling uninspired? Again, I feel like there would have been an opportunity there to flex. I mean, like everybody else, sometimes I probably just spend too long scrolling on dumb shit on Instagram and then getting really mad at myself. But in my better moments of non-inspiration, I tend to think, okay, you're obviously not coming up with any brilliant lyrics. Are there other things you can do that are adjacent to songwriting that help your career as a songwriter? So, for example, if for a couple of days I'm not coming up with anything good, or I just feel lazy and there's just no fertile ground, imaginatively. It's like, okay, well, you can still go through and update your bio on Twitter. There's so much like administrative stuff that to try to keep the time productive, even if it's not inspired, is a goal that I tend to keep at front of mind. What can you do with this time that's meaningful, even if it's not particularly artistic? And usually there's a bunch of shit, whether it's even just like, well, you got to do laundry at some point and you got to write a song at some point. You're not writing a song now, so go do laundry, that kind of thing. Will I sell more copies of my mini stage play soon? I think what you're talking about is Are You Handsome, that tiny little booklet. And that is, in fact, still available. It only comes as like the part of the deluxe package for an album that I put out called Parts of Speech, which is at the Doomtree store. All right. Oh, before we get into our fiction today, as is ever the case, these shows are free. So kick back, have a glass of wine if it's 5 where you are, or if you're just feeling like it's 5 inside. But if you're inclined, I am doing some fundraising today for 2 organizations. One is the Food Bank for New York. a good, committed, like money where their mouth is group of folks. And the second is called the North Side Achievement Zone, which is an organization that works in Minneapolis with families on the north side, which is primarily a neighborhood of color, to make long-term relationships with kids and their families. So that means helping sort out early childhood education and then watching and measuring to see how that impacts like a third grade reading score and tracking the measurable success of their scholars. They're badass. Okay, so I'm just going to ask our graphics guy, Tom, to fly in the Venmo information. You are, of course, encouraged and welcome to just make donations to those organizations or any big on your own. But if you've already got my Venmo in your phone from previous shows, that's where the money's going today. And thanks to the generous donations of a couple of unnamed benefactors, all the donations today are doubled, which delights me to report. Tom is just killing it. Thanks. Fantastic. Flies away. Great. Tracking metrics. So sick. All right, this is a new piece of fiction. And this one is excerpted a little bit, so I'm going to spend like 5 seconds setting it up. We are joining our protagonist, whose name is Kat. She's a single mom, and she's just been called in to meet with the vice principal at her daughter's school. Her daughter's name is Eve. Kat is mom, daughter is Eve. Ready? Here we go. The meeting had been called by Belmore's assistant vice principal. Kat had met him at the open house and remembered only that he'd introduced himself as Dr. Dave, had an asymmetrically receding hairline, wore Converse sneakers too clean to be credible, and also that introducing oneself to other adults with both a doctor and a first name was an untenable power dynamic, like trying to sit on both sides of the seesaw at once. Kat was 10 years younger than most of the parents at Eve's school. The first year at Belmore, she'd staged these massive performances of motherhood, arriving 15 minutes early to pick up, insisting that Eve sit in the back seat of the car, even though she was only 3 pounds shy of being front seat legal, French braids on picture days, fresh fruit at lunch. But the soul set cycle, they didn't care. They weren't mean, just indifferent. And Kat realized that even if they'd been wowed by her feats of single parenting, she wouldn't have had much to say to them. The couple of mom friends she did make at Belmore were more likely to shyly ask her for weed than audit her car seat compliance. Dr. Dave, the vice principal, had reserved an empty science classroom on the second floor so they could speak candidly without being overheard by office staff or other students. They waited for another set of parents to arrive, Missy's, one of Eve's best friend. Meanwhile, Dr. Dave made a great show of admiring Kat's tattoos, which did not reflect well on the taste of Dr. Dave, because her only visible pieces were 2 cover-ups and a stick and poke. The wide dark bands on each forearm blocked out lines of stars and an ohm symbol, respectively. The inside of her right wrist was just a series of uneven hatch marks. She'd started them while backpacking Asia, one for every country. But she'd quit after the 17th, Vietnam, when an older and handsomer backpacker noted that it was a pretty show-offy concept. She recognized immediately that this was true, but even now, when asked about the tattoo as an adult, she always tells the complete story so that listeners can appreciate she just stopped marking them at 17, but presumably went on to travel dozens of other far-flung countries after her awakening as a sophisticate, which is true, but still show-offy. Missy's parents walked in together, which Kat noted as strange because they'd come from different workplaces. They both arrived in light gray suits, which seemed somehow natural. His was wool, hers finished with a loose white scarf. He was attractive enough, maybe overdue for a haircut. She had a long neck and a sharp jaw, like a sexy dinosaur. And when she smiled, a network of lines materialized at the corners of her eyes that were undetectable in her neutral expression. After everyone got settled, a very sober Dr. Dave sat on the edge of the metal teacher's desk at the front of the room. Kat got the impression that he was glad to have a serious occasion on his agenda. Probably didn't see a lot of action as the assistant vice principal of Belmore. He explained that Missy and Eve had been caught playing the pass-out game in the girls' bathroom during lunch. Kat had known immediately what that meant, but let him continue. Essentially, it's asphyxiation. Dr. Dave's eyes flitted across all three faces, and satisfied with the observed levels of concern, he continued, the girls intentionally hyperventilate, then stand against a wall where another girl will push on her neck or chest until she loses consciousness. Jesus H. Christ, said Missy's father. Why? Is it a sexual thing? He and his wife, Suzanne, both shot looks at one another, but timed it wrong and missed. Dr. Dave took off his glasses. We've seen it before in the middle school kids, and it is a kind of experimentation with their bodies. It's not overtly sexual. He put his glasses back on. But it is very dangerous. Students in some schools have fallen and gotten concussions. It can even cause heart attacks. Kat and Suzanne agreed to meet later that evening to trade notes on behaviors at home. Was this indicative of larger problems? Drugs? Cutting? Both girls had practice after school. Eve had basketball, Missy had flute, so they'd be able to speak freely at Kat's place. It was now less than an hour before Susan was scheduled to arrive at Kat's. The dishwasher was running and the place was reasonably clean. Kat poured herself a glass of wine and opened her laptop. She Googled pass-out game, as Dr. David called it, which wasn't quite right, because there was no game. Eve and Missy weren't experimenting. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were getting off the planet for a while, by the only means available. Kat remembered doing it with her own best friend, Gwen, when they were 11, maybe 12, also at school, also in the girls' bathroom. She remembered her own dark hair hanging down over the shell toes of her sneakers as she stood with her butt against the cold wall, her head between her knees, breathing fast. And then she would snap herself upright, and Gwen would swoop in to press the flat of her palms on either side of Kat's windpipes, Gwen's elbows hyperextending like someone hadn't tightened the screws of her yet. And then the world would go dark. And a big sea swell of non-concern would come up and would turn off all her muscles, and she was dropped into a tranquil place that was wide and windless, and she knew, like in a lucid dream, that she was just visiting. But it felt like time arced out in a ribbon, and she could finally see all of it at once. And then she'd come to in Gwen's thin arms and ask, how long? 6 seconds. God, that felt like an hour. Okay, my turn. The pass-out game had a Wikipedia page. Kat scrolled to the bottom where there was a graph of data compiled by the CDC. 86 children aged 6 to 19 have died playing the pass-out game since 1995. On a whim, Kat visited the CDC site and typed in teenage driver. In the last year on file, 2,650 kids died learning how to drive. Through the living room window, Kat saw Suzanne walking up at exactly 6 o'clock. The day's pantsuit had been exchanged for a shirt dress, leggings, and ballet flats. Small-breasted and long-limbed, Suzanne really was elegant. She was the model consumer that Kate Spade's design team would have taped to a whiteboard. Walking to open the screen door, Kat wondered if it came naturally to Suzanne, or if she was the sort who suffered for it, with juice fasts and hours pedaling bikes bolted to the floor. Should I take off my shoes? Absolutely not. Come on in. I thought we could use a glass or two before getting to it. Suzanne pulled a bottle of Cabernet from her shoulder bag. Kat handed Suzanne the bottle opener and put a bowl of trail mix on the dining room table. She finished what remained of her own glass, and then, only because Suzanne was there, rinsed it under the tap before setting it down to be filled from the new bottle. Kat had a wine decanter somewhere, a gift, and she wondered if she should go dig it out. But Suzanne was already pouring, and with enthusiasm. She filled both glasses to within half an inch of the brim. Hell of a day, Suzanne said as she lifted her wine, and they carefully touched glasses, which were too full to make much sound. Kat took a sip. Holy shit, that is great, Kat said. It does the job. Suzanne tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and idly spun a gold stud a few turns. She took a sip that drained a fourth of her glass. Well, our girls are strangling themselves for fun, huh? Kat leaned back in her chair. Yep. At this point, Kat had already landed on her position. She planned on hearing Suzanne out, and she'd answer any questions that she had about Eve. But when it came time to wrap up this little cocktail hour, Kat was going to say, I think we should let them keep doing it. And she planned on arguing the point. Suzanne took a large handful of trail mix and set it on the napkin in front of her. Did you ever do anything like that as a kid? Like at their age? Kat set down her glass. Actually, I did exactly what they were doing at exactly their age. Well, we called it something different, Suzanne said, but we used to do it at camp. Her eyes stayed on her napkin, where she was separating the M&Ms from all the healthier fare, corralling them into a corner. I'm sure you could tell that Michael was freaked out this afternoon, but after we talked and I assured him the pass-out game wasn't part of some weird lesbian initiation, he left this one in my court. She glanced up, then reached for the bottle to top off Kat's glass and her own. Suzanne continued, and I called a cardiologist friend about the heart attack stuff. She certainly wasn't crazy about it, but she didn't think the game would kill a healthy 12-year-old. And if you're doing it with someone else, I don't think you're going to hit your head. Well, no more likely than at gymnastics or something. Kat nodded emphatically, thinking, holy shit. I have to say that part of me is going, they could be doing something worse, right? Kat was nodding up a storm, squeaking in her chair. With a quick toss, Suzanne threw all of the M&Ms into her mouth. Want to do me and I'll do you? And just like that, Kat was choking out Suzanne Bennett against the wall between the dining room and the den. They put couch cushions down first, just in case. Suzanne unclasped her solitaire, set it on the mantel. She took 10 fast, deep breaths with her hands on her knees. She exhaled the last one hard and stood with her back flat against the wall. Kat asked, ready? Lungs empty, Suzanne nodded mutely. She hyperventilated, held straight. Kat positioned her hands against Suzanne's neck and pressed forward. They looked at each other. Kat got a whiff of her perfume, rose and musk, as if the pressure had expelled it from Suzanne herself. Her eyes began to glass, and Kat thought, man, maybe this was a sex game. Then Suzanne went limp, and Kat kept her upright by anchoring her own hands on the wall beneath her armpits. And in a few seconds, Suzanne came back into her slim body and whispered, whoa, fuck. Then it was Kat's turn. She wore her hair too short now for it to drape over her feet. She took her 10 breaths, looking at the cuffs of her jeans, frayed at the fold. Then she stood up to let Suzanne push the heels of her hands against her throat, and with her internal carotid artery dammed for a moment, her blood ran very slightly alkaline, and the pressure on her vagus nerve slowed the beating of her heart to the rate of a much larger animal. Kat's vision went gray almost immediately, and then a little wave of static electricity swept over her scalp, then a jolt of elation, then the sea swell came up and she sagged into it, to be whirlpooled down and gently deposited into her very own private plot of oblivion, precisely as she had left it, as if it had been reserved specifically for her for all these years. And she knows that she is Kat, but for all these particulars of her life, she's left them behind. And from here, time seems like a simple misunderstanding of something else entirely. She could be any age. She might wake up in Gwen's thin arms when she comes back. Or maybe she will be in Suzanne's. Or if she were to miss her exit entirely, and take the one that leads 3 months into the future, she might come to in the arms of Pamela Richards from 4 doors down, while half a dozen women in her living room drink red wine, waiting for their turn at the wall. Thanks, guys, for tuning in to an afternoon show of force majeure and gym chic. One more time. Thanks, guys. One more time before I sign off. I'm going to ask Tom to just send in that Venmo information in case you would like to send a few bucks to either the Northside Achievement Zone or to the food bank for NYC. Bing, bing, bing. Ayo. Thanks, everybody. And even though I won't be doing these every Thursday, I probably will be doing them on occasion. So stay tuned. If you do want to stay connected, I started a mailing list some while back, and you can join it. And I'd say I send out a note every 3 or 4 weeks, just with a heads up on any cool online stuff going on. And that's at DessaWander.com. Okay, the quick thanks, right? Thank you so much to the Northside Achievement Zone. Thank you so much for the Food Bank for NYC and for all you're doing. And of course, the show would be impossible without the technical support of Tom. Tom, the effects guy. Thanks, buddy. All right, I'll see you soon. Thank you, Poland, France, Scotland, South Africa, Canada. I appreciate it, and I'm genuinely humbled by your choice to spend some time with me. Be well, be safe. Let's do good. Let's be brave, and let's do better. Let's make this place better. Good night.